Welcome back, everybody. Today's video is going to be a tier list for neutral items in 7.34. It's been quite a while since we did a tier list for neutral items. There's been a lot of shifts, a lot of little buffs and nerfs here and there. And I just want to get you guys hopefully on a similar page for the tiers of neutral items. Now, bear in mind, this might be a bit carry bias, but I also tried to, just really gauge it based on what I see in my games. The higher the tier, the more I see this item. So let's go ahead and get started. So spoiler alerts, I actually didn't have an F tier for neutral items because I would say that every neutral item I've seen at least a few times, and even the ones that are hyper situational that I don't see too often, when I see them, it's because they're very good in that given situation. So we didn't leave any neutral items in the F tier because I think they've actually done a very good job of balancing them over time such that the discrepancy between S tier and D tier is really not that large. It just comes down to the fact that certain neutral items, you'll want to lean towards them more than others because they're just more well-rounded and suitable for what heroes need at that stage of the game than some of the others. So guys, bear with me because I'm doing D tier through S tier, and there's also tiers for neutral items. But what we're going to do is we're going to start off with D tier, and we're going to talk about the neutral items from every tier 1 through 5 that fall into D tier. So just the worst of the worst neutral items in the game that you see the least. So let's go ahead and get into it. So from tier 1, the two we put in D tier are Fated Brooch and Lance of Pursuit. So these items just feel much worser for what they do than other respective items. For Fated Brooch, I would just infinitely rather have Tumbler's Toy, and I very rarely see people take Fated Brooch ever since it got nerfed in movement speed. That was why people took it. And Lance of Pursuit is a right-clicking item that's really only for heroes that are going to be like ganking, and they didn't want Tumbler's Toy or Fated Brooch. So I feel like I just see these items and I wouldn't ever see them in my games. I very rarely see people pick these up. Bullwhip and Dragon Scale from tier 2. These are both regen items that I feel like people think there's nothing else that I want here. I'll just take these items because this one gives me health and mana, this one gives me health regen, and none of the other ones were appealing. On tier 3, I have Vindicator's Axe as well as Dandelion Amulet. Both of these are incredibly situational. So Dandelion Amulet's nice if you're like a blink hero and you want to block 300 magic damage to make sure that, you're able to get it off against damage over time. And Vindicator's Axe is really nice against getting stunned and heroes that stun you with physical burst, something like a Slardar. These items are really nice there because they give you very specific things, but those very specific things are not relevant very often. For tier 4, I have Stormcrafter, Pentasword, and Martyr's Plate. So Pentasword, I think, is the worst of the carry items. I'd almost always rather have either Mindbreaker or Ninja Gear. And Stormcrafter, it just doesn't give you anything other than a little bit of everything. A little bit of move speed, a little bit of mana regen, and a little bit of damage to people around you. And it's nice and all, but this is a tier 4 item, people. In Martyr's Plate, it's just super situational. It'd be great if you're a tank and you're against a bunch of AoE magic damage and you redirect it towards yourself, especially on like a hero like Abaddon or something, or you have a Blade Mail. But those situations I think it would be incredibly impactful, but those are just very few and far between. For tier 5, I have Book of the Dead, really only good on Summons heroes. And then on Book of the Shadows, I honestly put this on such a low tier because it's so hard to use properly. So I would say that this is an item that you have to get used to using, and it pops up at 60 minutes into the game. So how do you practice using an item that is only in your 60-minute plus games unless you're in Jenkins Herald videos? How? So my issue with this is it's difficult to use compared to all the other ones. Moving on to C tier and back up to tier 1. For C tier, we have Broom Handle and Pigpole. Out of all the stat items, overall utility items, Pigpole is now the worst since it got nerfed by 1 all stats. And Broom Handle is the worst for me out of all of the right-click items because there's very few heroes that would prefer 4 armor over right-click damage at this stage of the game. And if they're a hero that would prefer the armor, they're probably an offlaner. And if they're an offlaner, they'd probably prefer Tumbler's Toy or even the Seeds of Serenity, for instance, for regen. For tier 2, I would put Vampire Fangs, Gossamer Cape, and Eye of the Vizier. There are going to be heroes that need lifesteal. That's why Vampire Fangs, something like a Gyrocopter. There's going to be heroes that Gossamer Cape is insanely good against, like TA and Ember Spirit. And supports tend to like Eye of the Vizier, but they also need to have mana boots and no mana problems. So these are all items that have high impact, but just they're very selective on which heroes would take them. On tier 3, same idea. like with Quiver. Quiver I have as my tier 3 neutral item for C tier because there's just certain heroes that love getting the Quiver, and 90% of heroes hate it. In terms of my other C tier item, it's just Elven Tunic because I think it's below average on every regard. There's other items that give you move speed and mobility, and there's other items that give you a little bit of damage, and those tend to just be better, and Elven Tunic's kind of like wishy-washy in that regard. For tier 4, I put Telescope because it just feels like at that stage of the game, if you're a support, you'd rather have an item to keep you alive or an item that helps you position. And it's like maybe one person will take it per game because it is nice, but it's also pub, so very few people are going to take it. And then I put Havoc Hammer because even though they did buff it a lot and it's still going to be nice on Blink Strength initiators, there's just other items I feel like I would want to have most of the time. For tier 5, we have Arcanist Armor and Fallen Sky. So Arcanist Armor is the same idea as a Martyr's Plate, but I also think it's a bit better because it just has potential to kill certain heroes instantly because like the Blade Mail effect. And Fallen Sky is nice and all, it's a blink, it gets you in there, but it's still canceled by damage over time, so it's not like super broken. And at that stage of the game, I think items that keep you alive are generally going to be more powerful on utility heroes than an item that's meant to initiate for you. Moving on to B tier. For tier 1, we have Arcane Ring. It's been nerfed all the way to 60 seconds, so it's effectively like 1.25 mana regen. So I still think it's a solid item, but if you just compare it to its old days where it's like 30 seconds because it got nerfed to 45, this item used to be way better, but it's still solid and a good pickup for any hero with mana problems, or you just want to be like a pseudo mana boot for your team. Good on a lot of intelligence heroes, obviously. And Shovel. Shovel is like, I put it in B tier because there's other items you would usually prefer, but if you're a support and you got a bunch of right-click items, if you're a carry and you got a bunch of support items, Shovel's not bad because it gives you a little bit of everything. Bounty runes, sustain from the mangoes and the salves, a little bit of everything. For tier 2, I have the little bit of everything items as well. Ring of Aquila, Vambrace, Pupils. I feel like you're never upset you got these items, but you're also never super excited you got these items either. So this is just the none of the other items fit my role, take these. For tier 3, Titan Sliver, Quickening Charm, and Ceremonial Robe. So Quickening Charm is nice and all, but it used to be a lot more cooldown reduction than it is now, and I just don't see people picking it up very often. Titan Sliver got nerfed, and it feels like a lot of the carry heroes right now would prefer some of the other items, which we'll mention later. And Ceremonial Robe, it's a utility item for teamfights, similar to all the other ones I've been putting lower in the tiers. And it might be nice for one person, but once again, it's just nice to have items for yourself, because right now there's so much assassin meta, there's so much like making sure you don't just randomly feed, that these like aura utility items are not going to have much effect in pubs, I believe. For tier 4, I have Mindbreaker and Spell Prism. Like, Mindbreaker is a nice damage item, no doubt. You need some right-click damage, put it in there. I think it's better than Pentasword because of the silence effect. And there's going to be games where you're against a mobile hero like Storm Spirit, and the silence will just be game-winning, or supports. And then Spell Prism, even though it's a solid all-around item, gives some cooldown reduction, a little bit of stats, a little bit of mana regen, they've just been nerfing it left and right. So it's kind of the same idea as the tier 1 and tier 2 neutral items we put in B tier, where, yeah, sure, I'll take a Spell Prism. I'm not upset about it, but it's no longer the whole, I got the broken item that it used to be. For tier 5, I have Ex Machina. I think it's an insanely powerful item, but ever since they nerfed it to have a 325 mana cost, it's just not as powerful because certain heroes just can't use it. And then Seer Stone, because for supports, I think that's probably the best item in the game for them. Most of the time, having that much cast range and being able to scan areas, vision being very powerful. But I also just think it's not like a crazy item, but supports are super happy to get it. And then Apex, once again, it's a stat item. I got nothing else. I'm a core. I don't want Seer Stone. I don't want Book of Shadows. So I'll take my Apex. A lot of the B tier items are, I got C, D tier items. So I'm taking these B tier items. That's how it really feels from my perspective. So moving on to A tier. A tier is really the tier where, like, if I'm a certain type of hero, I'm just taking these 100%, and I'm happy to get them. I actually moved Duelist Glove up to A tier because there's a lot of fighting right now, and it's 12 damage instead of 10. So even if you're not fighting, 12 damage, not bad on any hero that right-clicks. And just basically any carry or right-clicking offlaner or mid feel really good to get this item. Tumbler's Toy, amazing on pretty much every position-based hero in the game, which is 90% of heroes. So I put it in A tier, but, you know, there are heroes that would just never use it. And then Seeds. It is just the best regen item in the tier 1 right now. It gives 4 passive HP regen now, which is insanely strong. Like, that stage in the game, that's a ring of health. So if you're having sustain issues, this solves it immediately. On top of the fact that the active gives even more. It's basically a tango. For tier 2, I have Philosopher's Stone, Grove Bow, and Orb of Destruction. We all know what type of heroes buy Orb, or would like Orb of Destruction and Grove Bow. Insanely powerful items if you are a ranged right-clicker for Grove Bow, or you're a burst damage physical hero that's chasing people down. Orb of Destruction. And then Philosopher's Stone as a support, you're like, yes, money. Everybody's happy when you get these 3 items. For tier 3, I have Paladin Sword and Cloak of Flame. So I put Paladin Sword higher than Titan Sliver because it just feels like Paladin Sword's been buffed. The heroes that are good in the meta really need some lifesteal and they don't want to buy Satanic. And so I just feel like I'm seeing people pick up Paladin Sword a lot. And Cloak of Flames is just a nice all-around item. Armor, magic resistance, and a little bit of farming speed to boot. So it's an item that you're never unhappy to get, and I've been seeing it picked up more and more as well. For tier 4, I have Trickster Cloak that got nerfed and Aesthetic Cap, but I think the defensive items in the tier 4 are just nice. They are just nice. They have magic resistance and evasion on the Trickster Cloak with the Invis that people now have to buy detection for you, and then Aesthetics Cap, which is basically like a pseudo Eon Disc, which also gives a lot of HP regen. So these are just feels-good items, and if you're looking for something defensive, these are really nice. For tier 5, we have Pirate Hat and Stygian Deso. I just put the damage items in there because somebody's going to want them on the team. And these items can suddenly turn like ranged right-clicker for Pirate Hat into some crazy machine. And for Stygian Deso, the physical burst damage from the melee heroes is now astronomically higher. For S tier, the creme de la creme of the neutral items, the ones that if I see them, I'm taking them almost every single game, and I'm like, yes, I won the lottery. So for S tier, for tier 1, I have Occult Bracelet, just the best stat item. New mana regen, stats, a little bit of magic resistance, the whole shebang. Fairy Trinket, best item for any spellcaster in the game. Spells cost less, they do more damage. What else could you ask for? And then Spark of Courage, just the best right-clicking item tier 1. 18 damage, boom, baby. And if you're getting Gone On, it gives you 7 armor when you're below 50% HP. So Spark of Courage is just way too powerful. For tier 2, I put Specialist Array there. It's the best stat item now for Universal Heroes. It's the best item for ranged heroes, and you're just super happy to get it on pretty much everybody. So the only exception for ranged heroes would be Grove Bow on certain ones, but even then, if you get Specialist, you're like, I'm fine with that. So worst case scenario, I'm fine with that. That's a pretty good item. For tier 3, I have Defiant Shell, Ogre Shield Totem, and Psychic Headband. So Psychic Headband is the creme de la creme of the support items. Cast range, bonus int, pushing people away from you. What else could you ask for? Defensive, positioning, and the ability to protect yourself. Ogre Shield Totem, it's just a mobility item that doesn't get canceled by Blink. So it helps Blink initiators, it helps people that like a Leshrac or a Gyro that get Gone On and they can just get out. Like, it's just good for almost anybody. And then Defiant Shell gives all stats, armor, so it's good on heroes that just want a little bit of everything, which is Universal Heroes, just utility offlaners in general. And then it's really good on heroes with any on-proc attacks, bashes, or crits, because of the Echo Saber component that reflects attacks. So Defiant Shell, I've been picking this up almost every single game. It just feels really good. Tier 4, we have Timeless Relic. We all know that one. Spellcasters, the dream for them. As Spell Prism is getting knocked down the rungs, I think Timeless Relic just goes up and up because I think the balance between the two is just heavily leaning towards Timeless Relic now. Every spellcaster would like it. And then Ninja Gear. Even though they nerfed it a little bit, Ninja Gear is a smoke. Smoke is a limited commodity for a reason. I think Ninja Gear was only balanced when you could only have one in the team. You see professional matches from the previous patch where 3 or 4 Ninja Gears on one team, and I think that's the same idea that you could be seeing now. And at the very least, what's so nice about Ninja Gear that makes it S tier is that if you have a tier 3 item that you really need, say like a carry with lifesteal or a support with the Psychic Headband, you can just use the Ninja Gear, activate the smoke component, and then put it in your backpack. You just have it. So you have a, double the cooldown, but you have a smoke every 90 seconds. I would like to point out that if they want to nerf Ninja Gear, which I think they should, it should not lower cooldown if it's in your backpack. It should only trigger the cooldown if it's in your actual neutral item slot, because I think the ability to swap this in and out is just stupid, to be honest. Moving on to tier 5. I have Mirror Shield. Who doesn't want a Lincoln's Lotus combo with some all stats thrown in? Easiest item to use in the world. Like, if we compare this to Book of Shadows, you don't have to use it, and it's really difficult for the opponent to play around. Like, so not only is it easy for you, it's difficult for them. Giant's Ring, movement speed, free pathing. Do I need to say more? Especially in the late game with positioning being ultra important, it also gives you some strength on top of it. I feel like without the strength component, people would still take this item. And then Force Boots. So what you're seeing from these items is items that give you things that you really need at this stage of the game. Force Boots are a boot slot, they're a dispel when you force yourself, and they're a Force Staff. So that's like 3 items in one. Wow. So if you compare that to the other tier 5 neutral items, I think these 3 are just like way above, leagues above the rest. Yoda's above the rest. not leagues, because this is not Legends. This is Dota. So I hope you guys enjoyed this neutral item tier list. Let me know what you guys think, because obviously my opinions on this are a little bit carry bias and also controversial in the sense that we all have our preferences for what we like in our neutral items. Let me know what you guys think, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.